I don't even know where to start. Some nights, I still wake up sweating, trying to convince myself that it actually happened, that it wasn't just some twisted dream my mind made up. But it did happen. Every detail of it. The smell of his cologne, the creak of the office door, the way my stomach dropped when I realized who he really was. You ever think you know someone, like really know them, and then one day it's like you're staring at a stranger wearing the skin of the person you used to love? That's what it felt like for me. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I had built a life, even if it wasn't perfect. But life has this strange way of revealing things when you least expect it. Sometimes, it doesn't whisper the truth. It slaps you right across the face with it. My husband and I, well, my ex-husband, I should say, we weren't always on the best terms. Things had become cold between us, routine. We argued about small things that never used to matter. Bills. Work. The kids. Sometimes I'd look at him and wonder what happened to the man I married. The man who used to surprise me with breakfast or hold my hand just because. It felt like I was living with a ghost. He used to leave early in the morning and come back late at night. He said he was working on something big, but never told me what. I didn't ask too many questions because, honestly, I was just tired. Tired of the silence. Tired of the distance. Tired of feeling like I was married to a wall. At the time, I was working at this big company in the city, a firm that paid well but demanded everything from you. I had just started there a few months earlier, and I was proud of myself. I got the job on my own, or at least I thought I did. The CEO was always this mysterious figure. No one ever saw him, just his representatives and managers. People said he was some rich guy who liked to stay out of the spotlight. I never really cared who he was, as long as I got my paycheck. But then there was that one day, the day that changed everything. The day that started this whole nightmare. I came into work like usual, a bit tired from the night before because my husband and I had another argument. He accused me of caring more about my job than about our family. I remember rolling my eyes and telling him, at least one of us is doing something useful. It was harsh, I know, but I was angry. Anyway, I got to work, logged in at my desk, and tried to focus. Around noon, there was this strange tension in the air. People were whispering, moving quickly, acting nervous. I asked one of my colleagues what was going on, and she said, "The boss is coming." I laughed. "What boss?" She looked at me like I'd asked something stupid. "The owner. The big man himself. No one ever sees him." My heart weirdly started beating faster. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the thought of meeting the mysterious CEO everyone talked about. Or maybe, deep down, I already sensed something was about to go terribly wrong. A few hours later, I was in my office going through some files when my supervisor called me. "He wants to meet you," she said. I remember frowning. "Who?" "The CEO," she whispered. "He asked for you by name." I froze. I had no idea why someone that high up would even know who I was. I wasn't some executive or high performer. Just a hard-working employee trying to keep her head above water. I fixed my hair, straightened my skirt, and followed her down the hall to the elevator. She pressed the top floor, the one that only top-level management ever used. I'd never been up there before. When the doors opened, I felt like I'd stepped into another world. Everything smelled different, like expensive perfume and old money. The walls were glass, the furniture was sleek, the air felt colder. I was led to this large office with floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a second, I just stood there, speechless. The city looked so small from up there. Then I heard a voice. Low, calm, familiar. "You can sit down." I turned toward the desk, and there was someone sitting with their back to me, typing something on a laptop. They were wearing a dark suit and what looked like a wig. Long brown hair tied loosely. I thought maybe it was a woman. The person stood up, still not facing me, and said, "You've been doing well here." I smiled nervously. "Thank you," I said, even though I had no idea who I was talking to. My mind was spinning. Who wears a wig to the office? Then, something strange happened. The person turned slightly, and for a second, I caught a glimpse of their jawline. It was sharp. Familiar. My stomach tightened. There was something about the way they stood, the way they adjusted their cufflinks. I'd seen that movement before. Every morning. Every night. My throat went dry. "Wait," I whispered. "Do I know you?" The person froze for a second, then slowly turned around. And in that moment, I swear my entire world tilted. It was him. My husband. He was standing there, in a suit, wearing that ridiculous wig, smirking like this was some kind of joke. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. My husband, the man I shared a bed with, the man who complained about money, who always acted like he was barely scraping by, was standing in front of me in a skyscraper office, pretending to be someone else. I remember just staring at him, trying to piece it all together. The suit, the watch, the calmness in his eyes. He looked so different, so composed. Not the man who left socks everywhere, or the man who used to yell at me for leaving lights on. No, this was someone else. Someone who carried himself like he owned the world. "What the hell is this?" I finally said. My voice came out sharper than I expected. He chuckled, that slow, arrogant laugh that made my skin crawl. "You didn't recognize me?" he asked. He reached up, pulled off the wig, and let it drop onto the desk. His short hair was slicked back neatly, and he looked powerful, like he'd been living a double life. "Why are you here? What is this?" I asked again. My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely hear myself. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, almost amused, like he was enjoying the confusion on my face. Then he said something that froze me completely. "I wanted to see how you'd treat me when you didn't know who I really was." At first, I thought he was joking. I laughed nervously, waiting for him to explain. But he didn't. He just strolled around the desk, his shoes echoing on the floor, eyes never leaving mine. "You've been working for me this whole time," he continued, his tone low and deliberate. "Every paycheck, every project, every task. All of it. You thought you got this job because of your qualifications. But it was me. I made sure you got in." I blinked, trying to wrap my head around what he was saying. "That's not funny," I said quietly. "I'm not joking." I took a step back. You own this place?" He nodded once. Calmly. As if it were the most normal thing in the world. I felt dizzy. My knees were weak. I wanted to sit, but I couldn't. Every part of me was screaming that this wasn't real, that maybe I was dreaming. "Why would you do that?" I finally asked. "Why would you lie to me? Pretend to be broke, to live like..." He cut me off. "Because I wanted to see you for who you really are. Not the woman who loved me for money, but the woman who'd still stand by me if I had nothing." I stared at him in disbelief. "So you lied to me for years? You made me think we were struggling while you were out here running an empire." He tilted his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You sound angry," he said. I was beyond angry. I was shaking. But it wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. Every argument we'd had about finances, every night I stayed up worrying about rent, every time I told him I couldn't afford something, and he just let me suffer through it, knowing damn well he could have fixed it all with a single phone call. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You think this is some kind of game?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me like I was a piece on a chessboard that had finally made its last move. Then, as if to make everything worse, he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the cologne on him, the same one that used to make me melt. But now, it made my stomach turn. "You've been distant," he said quietly. "You've been cold to me. I wanted to see if you'd still act that way if you didn't know who I was. If you'd still treat me like I didn't matter." I blinked back tears. "You humiliated me," I whispered. "You watched me struggle. You let me think you were just some average man when all this time He interrupted again. You never asked. You never cared to look deeper. You wanted control. You wanted to be the one who looked like the provider. That hit me hard. It was twisted, the way he said it, like he genuinely believed he'd done nothing wrong. Like deceiving me was some moral test I'd failed. I opened my mouth to say something, but then something weird caught my attention. There was a faint smell in the air, sharp, musky, like sweat and aftershave. Not his usual scent. And something else, a smudge of dark hair on my blouse. It was odd because I hadn't hugged anyone or brushed against anyone that day. He noticed me looking down and smirked again. What's wrong? I didn't answer. My heart started racing again, this time for a different reason. The smell. The hair. The faint outline of a beard's stubble brushed against fabric. And suddenly, my mind flashed back to that morning. The way he hugged me before I left. The way his face brushed against my neck. And the faint itch it left behind. Something wasn't right. He was watching me too closely, like he was waiting for me to put the pieces together. And that's when the dread really started to sink in, that there was still something I wasn't seeing. Something bigger. Something worse. That's the end of part 2. He stood there, still smirking, watching me like he knew exactly what I was thinking. The silence between us was thick enough to choke on. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, faster and faster, as my eyes darted around the room, trying to find something, anything that made sense. That's when I noticed the second glass on his desk. It was half full of wine. My mind froze on that detail. I had just walked in. So, who had been sitting with him before me? He saw me glance at it, and his smirk deepened. You're always so observant, he said, as if that were some compliment. I didn't say anything. I just kept staring at the glass. There was lipstick on the rim. Red lipstick. The kind I never wore. My throat tightened. You had someone here? I asked quietly. He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, he said something that made me stop cold. She left in a hurry. Didn't even notice she dropped her earring. I froze. Slowly, I turned back. He was holding a small gold earring between his fingers. Delicate, shiny, expensive looking. It glinted under the office lights. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't mine. Something inside me snapped. You're unbelievable, I said. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. You bring me here, tell me you've been lying about who you are, and then you have the nerve to. He cut me off again, but this time, his tone was almost mocking. Relax. It's not what you think. Then what is it? He smiled faintly, walked around the desk, and stopped just inches from me. A test, he said. I blinked. A what? He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. I wanted to see how you'd react. My mouth fell open. You think this is a joke? He straightened up, putting his hands in his pockets like he was proud of himself. You've been distant for months. I wanted to see if you still cared. I let out a shaky laugh. You dressed up in a wig, pretended to be someone else, hired me to work for you, and staged an affair, all to see if I cared? He nodded once. Exactly. I just stared at him. There was no trace of guilt or shame in his eyes. Just calmness. Like everything he'd done, it made perfect sense in his mind. Something about his face made me feel sick. I needed to get out of that office. I turned toward the door again, but he stepped in front of me, blocking my way. Move, I said quietly. He didn't move. Instead, he looked me dead in the eye and said, You're not leaving until you understand what I've been trying to show you. That's when I noticed it again. That smell. Stronger this time. It wasn't his cologne. It was raw, masculine, almost animalistic. My stomach twisted. I looked down at my blouse, at the faint marks that hadn't been there earlier, and it all came flooding back. The strange moment that morning when he hugged me goodbye. The way he'd pressed too close. the way I'd felt stubble against my neck. I took a step back. "What did you do?" I asked quietly. He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" My chest tightened. "The smell. The hair. The way you hugged me this morning." My voice cracked. "What were you doing?" He laughed softly, a cold, humorless sound. "You really don't get it, do you?" "I'm not playing your game anymore," I said, my voice trembling. "You're scaring me." He looked at me like that was the reaction he wanted. Like fear was proof of something. "I wanted you to see how it feels," he said finally. "To live not knowing what's real. To question everything. The way you made me feel when you pulled away from me." I shook my head. "That's not the same." He interrupted. "Oh, but it is. You thought I was boring. You thought I was beneath you. So, I showed you what you really wanted. Excitement, mystery, power. And now you hate me for it." My heart was racing so fast it hurt. "You're insane." He smirked again, stepping closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Maybe. But you loved me once. Didn't you?" I couldn't even look at him. The man standing in front of me didn't feel like my husband anymore. It felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing his face. I brushed past him, heading for the elevator, but his voice stopped me again. "You're going to regret this," he said softly. "You'll see what it's like to lose everything." I turned, tears stinging my eyes. "You already made me lose everything. The moment you decided to lie to me." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside without another word. The doors closed between us, and for the first time, I actually felt afraid of him. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Afraid. As the elevator descended, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept seeing his face, that cold, knowing look. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. He wanted to break me down until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. When I got back to my floor, my coworkers looked at me strangely, whispering to each other. I didn't care. I just grabbed my things and left. But even as I drove home, I couldn't shake that smell, that sharp, lingering scent that clung to my clothes. It wasn't his usual cologne. It was something else. Something darker. And I started to wonder if maybe that test he talked about wasn't over yet. When I got home that evening, the house felt heavier than usual. You know that weird stillness you get when you just know something's off, like the air itself is waiting for something bad to happen? That's how it felt. Even the clock ticking on the wall sounded too loud, too deliberate. I tossed my bag onto the couch and just stood there for a while, staring at nothing. My head was a mess. My husband, or whatever version of him I'd just met, had flipped my entire world upside down. I thought maybe if I just took a shower, changed, and tried to sleep, my mind would reset by morning. But as I walked toward the bedroom, I noticed something strange. His shoes were still by the door. The same pair he'd worn earlier that morning. Which didn't make sense. He'd been at the office, dressed like a completely different man. So why were his shoes here? I crouched down, touched them. Cold. Dusty. Like they hadn't been worn in days. My stomach twisted. Maybe he'd kept a second pair in his office, I told myself. Maybe I was just overthinking everything. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I showered, changed into something comfortable, and tried to distract myself with TV. The sound barely registered in my mind. I couldn't stop replaying his words. "You've been working for me this whole time." Every syllable felt like another layer of betrayal. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to the sound of a door closing. Not loud, just soft, but sharp enough to jolt me awake. My heart skipped. I looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. For a moment, I thought maybe it was the kids, but then I remembered, they were staying at my sister's for the week. The house should have been empty. I sat perfectly still, listening. Another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Coming from the hallway. My pulse was pounding now. Hello. I called out. My voice cracked a little. No answer. I reached for my phone on the coffee table, but my hand froze halfway. The footsteps stopped too. Silence. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand up. If this is you, I said quietly, it's not funny. Still nothing. Just that thick, awful silence pressing down around me. I turned on the hallway light. Nothing there. The doors were closed, the floor clean, everything normal. But that's the thing about fear. Once it grabs hold, it doesn't need proof. It just sits in your chest and feeds on what-ifs. I took a few steps toward the bedroom, and that's when I smelled it again. That same scent from earlier. Musky, heavy, undeniably masculine. It was coming from the bedroom. My heart was hammering now. I pushed the door open slowly, half expecting to find him standing there, waiting for me with that same smug grin. But the room was empty. The air, though, it was thick with that smell. And something else. I noticed one of his shirts lying on the floor near the dresser. Not the one he'd worn that morning. A different one. Crumpled, like it had been yanked off in a hurry. I picked it up, and my fingers brushed against something rough. Coarse hair, stuck to the fabric. I dropped it immediately, my stomach turning. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The sound nearly made me jump out of my skin. I grabbed it, hoping it was a text, a call, something to anchor me. It was a message from an unknown number. Did you miss me? No name. No photo. Just those 3 words. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I typed back immediately. Who is this? No reply. I waited a minute. Then another. Then my phone buzzed again. Check the closet. I froze. My eyes darted toward the closet door, slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness peeked through. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I couldn't. It was like my feet were nailed to the floor. I told myself it was probably just him, playing another one of his stupid games. Maybe he'd slipped in somehow, trying to scare me into talking. I swallowed hard, stepped closer, my phone flashlight trembling in my hand. I reached out, grabbed the handle, and yanked the door open. Nothing. Just clothes, shoes, a few boxes on the top shelf. I let out a shaky breath, half laughing at myself. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe this was all in my head. The stress, the lies, everything. And then, just as I started to close the door, I heard it. A quiet breath. From inside. Low. Slow. Like someone trying not to be heard. I froze again, flashlight shaking as I aimed it into the darkness. Who's there? I whispered. The breathing stopped. And for one horrifying second, I saw movement, just the faintest shadow shifting between the clothes. I screamed and stumbled backward, slamming the door shut and bolting out of the room. I didn't stop running until I was in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter so hard they hurt. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. But I did. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows moving, heard whispers where there were none. My house, my safe place, felt like a trap. I didn't know if he had left, if he was still there, or if I'd just imagined everything. The next morning, I didn't even go into the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, my phone in my hand like it was a lifeline. I kept checking the messages from that unknown number, hoping for some explanation, anything that made sense. But there was nothing, just silence. When I finally forced myself to think clearly, I realized I had to go back to work. I had to. I couldn't just hide in the house forever. I told myself I would face it, that I could handle whatever game he was playing. But even as I said that, I felt a knot in my stomach, the same one I'd felt when I first walked into that office. Driving to work, I noticed the city felt different. Every car that passed me seemed suspicious. Every pedestrian glanced my way and made my heart race. I kept replaying the scene in the office, the way he had looked at me, the way he had smirked while watching me panic. It was like he knew me better than I knew myself. When I got to the office, the tension was even worse than before. People were whispering again, but this time it wasn't just excitement. There was fear in their eyes. My supervisor waved me over, but she didn't speak. She just handed me a folder and walked away. Inside the folder was my promotion letter. I had been waiting for this for months. But reading it felt hollow. Every word seemed to mock me, reminding me of the power he had over me, the control he could exercise without anyone knowing. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, but I couldn't. Every sound made me jump, the hum of the printer, the clack of keyboards, even the distant ringing of the phone. I kept thinking someone was watching me. I kept thinking he might appear at any moment, like a shadow that could step out of nowhere. Then, around noon, the acting CEO walked out of his office. He looked serious, more serious than usual. He called me into his office. My stomach dropped again. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "The owner, the real CEO, is back." I froze. My mind raced. I didn't understand. Wasn't he already here? What did that even mean? Then it hit me, the moment I saw him step out from the shadows behind the acting CEO. My ex-husband. Not the playful man from that morning. Not the prankster in the wig. This was him in full power, the billionaire I had unknowingly been working for all along. My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak. I just stared, my hands trembling. The acting CEO looked at me, then back at him and said, "You know her, sir?" "Yes," he said simply. His voice was calm, but it carried an edge that made me shiver. In that moment, I realized the truth. Every interaction I'd had with him, every secret, every test, every moment of confusion had been orchestrated. And now, the consequences were about to hit me in ways I couldn't have imagined. The second I realized who he truly was, a cold wave of panic washed over me. My promotion, the recognition I had worked so hard for, suddenly felt meaningless. Every achievement, every late night at the office, every sacrifice I had made, all of it had been under his watchful eyes, orchestrated without my knowledge. The thought made my stomach churn. I tried to keep my face calm, but inside, my mind was spinning. How could he do this? How could he manipulate everything in my life, from my career to my home, without me ever realizing? I had trusted him once, loved him once, and now every memory felt tainted. The acting CEO cleared his throat nervously. She's been working here under your direction the whole time," he said, almost like he couldn't believe it himself. I turned toward him, ready to explode. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling but rising with anger. "Why didn't you ever tell me that I was working for you this whole time?" He leaned back slightly, a faint, unreadable smile on his lips. "I wanted to see who you were. I wanted to see how you'd act when you didn't know." My hands curled into fists. So this was all a test. My life, my career, my dignity. A test. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave me that calm, confident look. The look that had made me uneasy since the first moment I realized what he had done. It was the same look he had when he played the prank with the wig. Only this time, it was worse. Far worse. I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, but I was trapped. Not physically, mentally. I had no idea what he was planning next, and the uncertainty was suffocating. "Sit down," he said finally, almost gently. I shook my head. "No. I don't. I can't." He leaned closer. "You've been difficult for months. Cold. Distant. You've doubted me, ignored me, questioned me, and now you see who I really am. Don't you want to know why?" I hesitated. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to get out of this room, to leave him and never look back. But part of me, a part one didn't want to admit, was terrified too. Terrified of what might happen if I tried to leave, if I challenged him. He smiled faintly. "I see it in your eyes. You're scared. You don't know what's coming." And he was right. I had no idea. Days passed after that, and life became unbearable. At the office, he didn't speak to me directly most of the time, but I could feel his presence. The way people glanced at me, the subtle nods, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Everything reminded me that I was under his control, even without him saying a word. At home, it was worse. I couldn't shake the fear from that night. Every noise made me jump. Every creak in the floor, every wind gust rattling the windows, felt like him testing me again. It didn't matter that he wasn't physically there. I could feel him. And that feeling was worse than any prank or game he could have pulled. Then, one day, everything hit me all at once. I received a letter from my children's school. The tuition payments, which my husband had always taken care of before, had stopped. Immediately, panic set in. I called the school, but all they could tell me was that no payments had been received in months. My mind raced. How could this happen? I had never handled that account, never managed those payments. And now, suddenly, everything was falling apart. I realized what he was doing. This wasn't just a prank anymore. This wasn't a test of love or loyalty. This was punishment. He had carefully built an image of himself as a powerless man in my eyes, watched me navigate life thinking I had control, and then revealed his true power. And now, every part of my life was crumbling under that power. My career, my family, my children's future. I sat in my car, staring at the school letter, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold it. I felt trapped. I felt betrayed. I felt utterly powerless. And that's when the thought hit me, sharp and cold. Maybe he didn't just want to teach me a lesson. Maybe he wanted to break me completely. The next morning, I couldn't sleep at all. My eyes felt heavy, my body exhausted, but my mind refused to rest. I kept replaying everything he had done, the office prank, the revelation, the messages, the shadow in my bedroom, and it all looped in my head, growing darker every time. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I got to the office, the atmosphere was suffocating. Everyone was moving around like they were on edge, and I could feel the weight of his presence even though he wasn't speaking to me directly. The whispers started again as soon as I stepped in. Did you hear about her? Is it true? The CEO? People kept glancing nervously toward his office. I tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't. Every keystroke, every email, every phone call felt like a countdown, like I was waiting for some inevitable disaster that I couldn't stop. And then it happened. He called me into his office again. I froze in the doorway, heart pounding. He was sitting behind his massive desk, the city skyline behind him making him look larger than life, untouchable. His expression was unreadable. Calm. Cold. Powerful. You know, he began, his voice low. You've been very disobedient lately. I flinched. Disobedient? You mean I haven't played along with your games? He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. You've questioned me, doubted me, challenged me. And that's not acceptable. I could feel every word like a punch. It was one thing for him to play games in the office, but sitting there calmly and talking about control like this made my skin crawl. I don't understand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've done my job. I've done everything I was supposed to do. He smirked faintly. Have you? Or have you only done what you thought was right? You've been thinking for yourself. That's the problem. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to stand up, to fight, to scream. But I didn't. I couldn't. The fear that had been building for days was now a living thing inside me, weighing down my limbs. Then he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. You've been working under me all this time. You thought you were independent. You thought you were making your own choices. However, the truth is, I've been guiding every step and watching every move. And now you see what happens when you defy me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The words weren't just chilling, they were a warning. I realized in that moment that nothing I had done in the last months mattered. Every effort, every late night, every decision. It was all under his control. And he had decided I needed to be reminded of it. I tried to leave, wanted to tell him I was done playing his games, but he stopped me. He stood up slowly, like a predator circling its prey. You think you can walk away? That you can ignore this? No. You're part of this now. You've been part of it all along, and it's not over. I felt panic clawing at me. I wanted to scream, to call someone, to escape. But even then, I realized, no one could help me. No one could see what I had seen. No one could comprehend the intricate layers of control, manipulation, and deception that had been orchestrated over the course of months. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, he smiled, that slow, unsettling smile that used to make my heart skip. You think you're the victim here, he said softly. But really, you've been a part of your own downfall all along. I stumbled back, my head spinning. I didn't understand. How could I have been part of it? Every step I had taken had been mine. Or had it been? I couldn't tell anymore. Every memory, every interaction, every decision. I doubted myself. And that doubt, that uncertainty, was exactly what he wanted. The rest of the day was a blur. I barely noticed the hours passing. Every glance, every whisper, every shadow felt like a trap. I could see the control he had over everyone, the way people moved around him like he was untouchable. I realized that not only had he controlled me, but he had subtly controlled everything in my environment to amplify my fear, my paranoia, my sense of helplessness. By the time I left the office that evening, I felt hollow. My body was exhausted, but worse, my mind was trapped in a cage of fear and confusion. Every step toward home felt like walking into another trap, another layer of his plan. And then I saw it, a note slipped under my car door. I froze, heart hammering. It read, "You can't hide. Not from me. Not from what's coming." I felt my hands go cold. My chest tightened. I realized something terrifying. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. I don't even remember driving home that night. I just remember the road lights blurring past me, the sound of the rain hitting the windshield, and my thoughts spiraling in every possible direction. My phone buzzed a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. I didn't want to see another message. I didn't want to see his name. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt like I was suffocating. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely turn the key in the lock. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but heavy. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to breathe. Then I saw it. A small white envelope sitting neatly on my dining table. I froze. I knew I hadn't left it there. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. His. My stomach dropped. I opened it carefully, hands trembling. Inside was a single piece of paper with one line written across it. You don't get to disappear. You work for me. Always have, always will. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around the house, half expecting him to be there, hiding in the shadows. But it was empty. Just me, and the echo of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sat down at the table, my mind racing. How did he get in? Did he have a key? Did he come while I was at work? The thought made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number, even though I didn't know what I'd say if he answered. But he didn't. It went straight to voicemail. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me, something between fear and anger. He had been pulling the strings for too long. Watching me, controlling me, testing me like some kind of experiment. I wasn't going to let him break me completely. I was done being the one who was afraid. That night, I stayed awake with every light on. I didn't move. I just sat on the couch, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No sound. No movement. Just the occasional gust of wind outside and the hum of the refrigerator. Around 3 a.m., my phone lit up. A message from an unknown number again. My chest tightened. Go to the office tomorrow. Your final evaluation awaits. My hands went cold. Final evaluation? I didn't even know what that meant anymore. But part of me, the part that still wanted answers, knew I had to go. If I didn't face him, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what was next, waiting for the next message, the next knock on the door. So the next morning, I went. The building felt different that day. Emptier, colder. Even the security guards looked uneasy. When I got to the elevator, one of them stopped me. "Ma'am," he said, "are you sure you're supposed to be here today?" I hesitated. "What do you mean?" He looked uncomfortable. "They said the top floor's been locked down. Only authorized personnel are allowed in." I felt a chill run through me. "He told me to come," I said quietly. The guard exchanged a nervous glance with his colleague, then stepped aside. "If he called you, then you can go." The elevator ride felt endless. I could hear the soft hum of the cables, the steady ticking of the floor numbers lighting up one by one. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked like a stranger, pale, tense, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. When the doors opened, the floor was silent. The lights were dimmed, and the air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. I walked toward his office, the click of my heels echoing down the hallway. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. He was sitting there, calm, collected, with that same faint smile that haunted me. The city skyline stretched behind him, and sunlight poured through the glass, catching the edges of his tailored suit. He looked like someone who had already won. "You came," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I was wondering if you would." I swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window, his hands in his pockets. "You've always misunderstood me," he said. "You thought this was revenge. You thought it was about control. But it's not. It's about truth." "Truth?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "What truth?" He turned to face me, eyes calm but cold. "The truth is that everything you have, every success, every opportunity, every step forward, came from me. You thought you built it yourself. But you didn't. I built it for you. And now, you owe me." My stomach twisted. "I don't owe you anything." He smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong." He stepped closer, his tone almost soft, but there was something in his eyes, something dark, unrelenting. "You can leave if you want. You can walk away. But I promise you, nothing in your life will work again. The world you built will crumble the second I let go of it." I stared at him, frozen. I wanted to believe he was bluffing, but deep down, I knew he wasn't. He had already proven how much power he had. He could ruin me without lifting a finger. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. "Why?" I whispered. "Why are you doing this?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Because I gave you everything," he said quietly. "And you never even knew who I was." And just like that, I understood. This wasn't just about power. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about pride. He wanted me to see him, to recognize the man beneath the mask, to acknowledge his control, his reach, his influence. And now he had it. I stood there for what felt like hours, just staring at him. Every second stretched longer, heavier. The man standing in front of me wasn't the same person I used to know. He was colder, sharper, like all traces of humanity had been stripped away, leaving only this calculated shell. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, break something, do something, but all I could do was whisper, "You can't control me anymore." He smiled faintly. "Control?" he said, almost amused. "You still don't get it. This isn't about control. It's about ownership. You can't take back what's never been yours." That broke something inside me. The months of fear, confusion, humiliation, it all came crashing down at once. My heart was pounding so fast I could barely think, but for the first time, I didn't care about what he could take from me. I was done being scared. "You think money makes you untouchable?" I said, my voice trembling but growing stronger. "You think power means you get to play God with people's lives? You're pathetic." For a split second, his expression faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it. Then the mask returned. "Careful," he said softly. "You don't want to say something you'll regret." I stepped closer. "No, I think I've regretted enough already. I regret trusting you. I regret loving you. And most of all, I regret letting you think you could break me." He stared at me for a long time. The room went silent, so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the city outside. Then he laughed. Low, quiet, and unsettling. "You really think you can walk away from this?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the door. My hands were shaking, my heart racing, but I didn't look back. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. As soon as I stepped into the elevator, I felt my knees weaken. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, haunted, but there was something else there too, defiance. Maybe for the first time since this nightmare began. When I got to my car, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, trying to breathe. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was another message, this time from my bank. My account had been frozen. Every cent. Gone. He wasn't bluffing. The realization hit like a punch. My savings, my children's tuition, everything I had worked for, he had it all. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself not to cry. Crying was what he wanted. Breaking was what he wanted. Instead, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You're not done. Not yet." Over the next few days, I started piecing together what little I had left. Old contacts, work emails, anything I could use to start over. I deleted every message, every photo, every memory that tied me to him. I even changed my number. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I was gaining some control back. But then, the letters started showing up again. At first, they were small notes left under my windshield wiper, always signed with the same phrase, "You can't erase me." Then they started arriving at my office, on my desk, in my mailbox, even slipped under my apartment door. Each one was short, deliberate, like breadcrumbs leading me deeper into his game. My friends started noticing the change in me. I stopped answering calls, stopped showing up for lunch, stopped sleeping. I couldn't tell them the truth, that my ex-husband, the man they thought was long gone, was quietly dismantling my life piece by piece. They wouldn't understand. One night, I sat in my kitchen staring at a new envelope. My hands were shaking, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a photograph of me, sitting in my car that morning. I dropped it immediately. My heart stopped. That photo had been taken just hours earlier. That was when I realized it wasn't just about control anymore. He was watching me. Constantly. Everywhere I went. Every move I made. I ran through the house, checking every window, every corner, every light. I turned off my phone, unplugged my laptop, pulled the curtains closed. My breathing grew heavy, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, from outside, I heard it, the faint click of a camera shutter. I froze. My whole body went cold. I moved to the window and carefully pulled the curtain aside just enough to look out. No one was there. Just darkness. The street empty. Silent. But I could feel him. Watching. Waiting. I whispered to myself. He wants me to lose my mind. And that was when I knew, if I didn't find a way to stop him, to expose what he was doing, I would never be free again. I don't know how many nights passed before I finally decided I'd had enough. The fear had eaten at me for so long that it started to feel normal. But that night, something changed. It wasn't courage, exactly. More like exhaustion. I was tired of jumping at shadows, tired of checking over my shoulder, tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. So I made a plan. I went back through every message, every letter, every photograph. I studied them the way he once studied me, looking for a pattern. And eventually, I found one. The postmarks, the times of the emails, even the handwriting, it all lined up with one place. The private office downtown, the one he used before he retired. If he was still watching me, he would be there. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to drag my friends or my kids into it. I just drove there after sunset, parking 2 blocks away so he wouldn't see my car. The air was cold, the city quieter than usual, the kind of stillness that makes every sound echo. I walked slowly, heart hammering, every step heavier than the last. When I reached the building, the front doors were locked, but the side entrance wasn't. It creaked open like it was waiting for me. I slipped inside. The place smelled like dust and old paper. The lights were dim, only a few flickering bulbs left on in the hallway. I followed the sound of faint music. Classical, soft, deliberate. It led me to the same office I'd been in that day, months ago, when everything started falling apart. The door was open just enough for me to see inside. He was there, sitting at his desk, perfectly calm, a glass of wine in his hand, as if he'd been expecting me. "I wondered when you'd show up," he said without turning around. "You've always been predictable." Something inside me snapped. "Stop it," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to echo off the walls. "I'm done playing your games." He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Games? You think this was a game?" I stepped closer. "You destroyed everything. My job, my money, my peace, my sanity. For what? Because I didn't treat you like a god." He stood up, the calm in his eyes shifting into something darker. "I gave you everything," he said. "And you threw it away. You didn't just walk out on me. You erased me. Do you know what that feels like?" I took another step forward. "You erased yourself the moment you started this." For the first time, he looked uncertain. Just a flicker. It was small, but it was enough. I pulled my phone out and held it up, recording. "Every message, every letter, every threat, it's all here," I said. "The police already have copies. You can't hide anymore." He froze. His hand tightened around the glass. "You wouldn't." "I already did." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on his desk. Then he laughed quietly, almost to himself, and set the glass down. "You always were smarter than I gave you credit for." I didn't move. I just stood there, waiting, ready to run if I had to. Finally, he said, "Then I guess this is where it ends." He turned back toward the window, the skyline glowing behind him, and I took the chance. I walked out without another word, without looking back. My legs felt like they might give out, but I kept going until I was outside, breathing the cold night air. I didn't know if he'd follow, if he'd fight back, if he'd try something else. But for the first time in months, I didn't care. I had proof. I had my voice. And that was something he couldn't take away. The next morning, I went straight to the police. They took everything, the messages, the photos, the recordings. They didn't say much, but I could see in their faces that they believed me. Maybe they couldn't arrest him right away, but the investigation had begun. The days that followed felt strangely quiet. No messages. No letters. No shadows moving where they shouldn't be. The silence that used to terrify me now felt like peace. I changed my number again, moved into a smaller apartment across town, and started over. The kids stayed with my sister for a while until I got everything sorted. Sometimes at night, I still think I hear that faint click, the sound of a camera shutter, and my stomach tightens. But when I look outside, there's nothing there. Just the city lights, distant and calm. Maybe he's still out there, watching, waiting for me to slip back into fear. Maybe he finally realized he lost. Either way, I don't care anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm free. If you enjoyed the video, please share, subscribe and turn on your notifications.